Hi everyone, today we are going to talk about how you can ace or nail your MBA interview. I'm Jen T with the ARINGO MBA Admissions Consulting. We've been around for about 20 years, helping over 4,000 candidates get into top MBA programs across the globe. If you are interested in some assistance, we can do anything from helping build your strategy to helping with your story bank and tying your personal stories to why this school is the best school for you, all the way up to submitting your application and helping with interview prep as needed. If you want to look at our stats or figure out more about how we could help you, look at our website, aringo.com. All right, so you got the call, right? Like now it's time for you to actually plan for your interview. So you want to think about what this really means. Take a moment to relish the fact that your application got you the interview. They think that you are admissible. Now it's time to make sure a good fit and that you kind of match what you say, especially in a world of AI. There's a bit of a litmus test here, right? Did everything kind of align with what you've told us in your application? Then they want you to show that you've done your research. So reread your application so that they know what you've already told them. Think about any new stories that have happened or any stories you didn't get to tell in the application because they may be new information for them to learn and see if they haven't read your application or if they have read your application. Then you want to be able to know who your interviewer is. You could definitely look up interview debriefs or typical questions or typical interviewers for the specific program you're applying to. Most of the time they fall into a category of it's either somebody from the admissions committee, a current student, an alumni. There are a few schools that actually use faculty, which is a bit of a wild card that you want to also prepare for. But there are some schools that actually use a combination of. And so when preparing for your interview, you want to make sure that you're ready for whoever it could be if you've not been assigned. All right. So what is an interview all about? So if we kind of call it its DNA, is what they're looking for. So they're looking for your intellectual humility and about how you reflect on what has happened. Do you have the agility to learn when you are either you have experienced something or you're in the middle of something? You can actually pivot out of it and to do something different. It doesn't mean that you had to be successful. You could have failed, and that's okay too. But it's all about like thinking in the moment. The other thing that they're going to be looking for is, are you going to bring a lot to the table, but not be so arrogant? So you want to be able to show that you have these skills and experiences, but you're still very much capable. I think that really kind of comes down to not seeming overqualified for an MBA because, there's a point to being like, why do you even need this if you've already accomplished all of these things? How are we going to help you? So again, make sure to show that vulnerability. Not everything has to be a top-notch, everything delivered, and everything was perfect. The MBA AdCom is excited about your flaws. They're excited about your failures. They're excited to see how you recovered and what experiences you can share with your peers in the classroom. So it's important to remember that not everything has to go perfectly, and you don't have to have this record of everything has been super successful and you've never experienced failure. So I think that the other part of that is acknowledging that it wasn't just you who helped get something across the finish line and that you had a team along the way. And then the other part that they're going to want to know is why now? Why is this the right time in your career to make this move? If you have less years of work experience, they may say like, why not take a few more years to develop more skills or experience more things? And you want to make sure that you can say, this point is crucial for me to be able to make this move because I want to get to this place, this accomplishment, or this role, and I have to do it now, or else I'm going to essentially be wasting my time. And that's, what they need to know. The other thing is like you want to be able to show, I know the area that I've been in. So like if you've been in marketing, like the landscape, and if you want to continue on, right? Like what's impacting that arena. But if you're wanting to pivot into something new, you want to be able to show knowledge and understanding of where you're wanting to go. So, understanding what the changes are on the horizon, and how you could be part of that. Okay, so the core 4 are essential questions that an MBA AdCom is going to be looking for you to answer, no matter who is your interviewer, is tell me about yourself, right? So the biggest thing that people fail to realize is tell me about yourself. So this question is not only asking about your professional experience, but more about your background and who you are. And you need to do it like in 2 minutes. So think of a way to kind of brand yourself a little bit in the very beginning. I've always been a very curious person. This led me to study in engineering and how things go together. And then I found in my career that in marketing, I was able to connect the dots for consumers between what we're offering and what they're looking for, and had success in these roles and was able to be able to do something and accomplish something. But, on a personal note, this is what I like to do in my free time. So you want to be able to kind of build this story and kind of make it make sense for them and be able to give them the complete picture of who you are. Why MBA? I think that we've kind of covered this a little bit, but you want to talk about there's specific things you need to get out of the MBA. And you can even give them a bulleted like 1, 2, 3. Right? I want to gain a network. I want to gain the skills, and I want to be able to pivot into X, Y, and Z. Why this school? This is where you get to demonstrate your research. This is how even if you live hundreds or thousands of miles or a continent away, that that this school is the right fit for you. And you're going to be able to do that by mentioning things that are specific and different about that school or that program that no other school is offering. And this is really how you kind of like seal the deal to say like, this is my number one. And then beyond that, they want to know about your goals. On occasion, I've prepped people and their first answer about their goals is like, in the future. And it's like, no. Or like, it's so micro of like, oh, I want to get my MBA to be able to make a shift in my career. No. In the end, the question here is, what do you want to do after you graduate? And the whole secret behind that is like, can this school help you get there? And then in the long term, what are you wanting to do? And what other parts of the program can help benefit you in the long run? So just know that that is exactly what this question is looking to answer is, what are your short-term goals post MBA and long-term in the future? Next, they're going to sometimes give you behavioral questions. Not all schools do it, or some schools will maybe throw like 1 or 2 in, and then some of them it is pure behavior questions. And so these are the tell me a time when questions. And so be ready to answer them and start thinking of different ways. A lot of people, we've been using the STAR method, which is situation, task, action, result. But the Carl method takes it just a little step further of, give the context of what's happening, talk about the action you took, what the result was, and then what you learned. And again, like, I think that this is something that will help set you apart and give them the understanding that you can reflect on what happened and not just celebrate the win, but be able to take something forward with you. Here are some of the typical questions that you might find in, as far as like mock interview questions that you might want to kind of start thinking of or creating a bank of answers. They want to know about conflict. How do you handle conflict? This is a crazy, insane opportunity. You are going to be thrown into classes, team projects with people from all over the globe, and all of them are top of their field. So no leadership is typically assigned in these groups. And so how do you step into a situation and either help move the mark as a support, like not as the leader itself, but as a participant? Like, what do you to help get that done? And then also, how do you solve conflict or disagreements as the leader itself? So think about those times of like, tell me a time you disagreed with your supervisor. Tell me about a time when somebody wasn't pulling their weight. You want to be able to think, how does this apply to the MBA program and what I'm going to be experiencing there? So the stories that can help them draw a parallel are the ones that are going to resonate best for them and help them make a great judgment call on you. Now, they also want to know about failure, right? Like, are you able to handle failure? You're going to be learning so much at one time. Not everything is going to go your way. But you still need to be able to take risks. So they're going to ask you about a time when you failed or whenever you missed the mark, anything like that. They're going to ask questions. Start thinking about those stories that you can share and put them into kind of that Carl format. More questions that they're going to talk about are ethics. Right. And so there's sometimes where I've had clients that are kind of like, I don't know that I've ever had like an ethical moment. So if you get to this question and you don't have something to share where you haven't been asked to do something unethical or thought about something unethical or took the long route because it was the ethical thing to do, then maybe you can think of something that you witnessed, right? Like, I think that this is one of those questions that could throw somebody off. One, they're not normally thinking of like, oh, they're going to ask me about ethics. Like, it's a question that kind of like stuns some people. And so be prepared for it. And again, if it hasn't happened to you directly, amazing. That's really fantastic. And it sounds like you've been with great organizations and people. But there has to be a moment where you could have witnessed something where either somebody could have made an unethical decision or they did. So think about that and what you would do if you were in their position, or even like if you witnessed it happen, how you could have stepped up to maybe change the direction of it. The other thing that they're going to talk about is leadership, especially without authority. So tell us the time you had to influence a group without direct leadership. This is really easy if you're a consultant because you do this all day, every day, and help influence decisions. But thinking back, like, let's break it down a little bit more. Were you able to do that through the fact that you've built relationships with these people? Were you trusted because of your expertise, or did you use data to convince them to follow you? What was it that helped these teammates decide, like, yeah, I'm going to follow you and do what you asked based on what? And then the other thing is, collaborating across different teams. That's also an important skill of being able to kind of liaise or translate between the two different departments of, like, maybe you were leading a project where you had to work with the finance department and the marketing department, and you were able to make that happen by building collaboration and helping them with a unified communication and understanding that they had similar goals. Just some examples there. Okay, so the other part is they're probably going to ask you a couple of things that are industry specific. They want to know, how do you talk the technical talk without being too technical for somebody that isn't inside of it, but they need to understand the business importance of like a project or an error or a problem that's coming up. Can you communicate that to other people? If you're in consulting or finance, we're talk about like a deal or a project where the data didn't line up or was misleading. That's really interesting, right? if you're an entrepreneur, like if you've said like after I graduate, I want to become an entrepreneur or start my own business, then talking about your readiness and openness to risk and thinking about what happens if it doesn't, like if you're not ready to launch, what's your plan B? And then I think that sometimes there's kind of like a current events, current topics that they're going to ask about. Right now, AI is obviously a really big influence across every industry. And so they can just talk about like how, or ask how AI is disrupting your field or could in the next few years. Pretty common question there. All right, so the reverse interview, or when the interviewer says, do you have any questions for me? This is not a time for you to ask questions that are either easy to find on the website, something that is much more procedural, like when will I hear back, or their assessment of you. How do you think I did? Like, those aren't the questions that you want right now. The questions that you want to ask is something that will give you that is relevant to the school itself. And again, is going to help them see your curiosity and resourcefulness all at the same time. So you could ask, how has the integration of AI evolved over the last few years? Or how, I don't know. There's a lot of great questions you could ask there. Alumni focus. So you can always ask them what was their favorite part of their program, or what was one thing that they did differently. Same thing for current students. You can ask something somewhat similar about that. The other thing is to kind of also talk about future tense and saying, if I were to get admitted, what would be the, number one thing that you think I should do or prioritize when I get on campus, or what should I do over the summer to prepare for getting on campus in fall? So anything that asks them for those type of advice. So the last piece of this is that you want to make sure that you're ready and polished, and you're here, and that they can see you and feel like they're the only thing that you're paying attention to. And so you want to make sure, if you're doing a Zoom, obviously clear your background and make sure that things are nice and clean. You can blur the background, whatever makes it easiest. And then you want to make sure that you're actually making eye contact with the camera. It is so hard to do and not like look at yourself in the corner. My tip for clients is to move your image or their image right underneath the camera on your computer so that you're always looking up at them. They can also tell when you're reading from a script, and they can follow your eyes. So just make sure that you're not doing that. Like, turn the other monitors off, whatever it takes to make sure that you're really focused on them and they can't see any sort of assistance that you're having. Then you want to make sure that you're sitting up, that you're smiling, and then you can speak just slightly slower, just to make sure that everything kind of translates across the microphone and that they can hear you. And again, I think we've already talked about this, but you want to have a neutral background. If you, sometimes I'll wear my glasses and there'll be a reflection. So you want to make sure that you're positioned in a way that the reflection isn't blocking your eyes and your eye contact. Another thing is, obviously, you still want to be professional. This is an MBA interview. You don't necessarily have to wear a three-piece suit, but you do want to dress professional and make sure that they can see that you're dressing up for them, for the job that you want, or I guess the goal of an MBA student. All right, so the critical mistakes that we have really been able to spot is like somebody sounding scripted. So I would say like the biggest thing is to practice, and I tell this to our clients all the time, is answer the same question 5 different times, 5 different ways. Don't read a script. The more that you've practiced it, answering it several different ways, the better it is on the day of. And so that's one way to do it. The other thing is to kind of think about I have pillars, or I would say bullet points for what I want to get accomplished today, like what I want to accomplish in these answers. And then you don't want to sound too rehearsed, obviously. Another thing that you could do is use voice to text to see kind of what really comes out of your mouth when you're trying to answer these questions, and then find any of those gaps and address it. And it'll give you a little bit of like a reality check sometimes. Another mistake that people make is by rambling. Super easy to do, right? So with rambling, you want to make sure that you're spending, X amount of time on it, and this can vary, right? Like depending on the question and the school. So you want to not spend 5 minutes on the context of story. You want to get everything in within 1 to 2 minutes. So 120 seconds for the most part. Most of your questions should be answered within that amount of time. So you don't want to lose the attention of your interviewer, making sure that they're engaged and reading their body cues and say, actually, I think that I'm rambling a little bit. Let me just get to the point and get them back on course. Like if you can see that they're glazing over, show your emotional intelligence, right? Like say like, okay, I think that I've gone a little bit too far into the weeds. I want to kind of steer back. So essentially what happened was this, and then this is how it got better, how it got worse, or whatever it might be, to get back on course for answering that question. The other thing is you want to try to do that natural pacing by using a stopwatch and figuring out what you can include in the allotted amount of time. All right. Now moving on to the next mistake. All right. So blaming others for failure. So this happens sometimes when it feels like taking the blame is not good for them. So if you are in a situation where you're like, ooh, this makes me look bad, then don't use that example. So this is where the preparation is key and very important. So take the time to think of like, what is the failure story that you want to share? And then think about how, again, you take responsibility for your role in that process itself, or, the situation. And then you can make sure, I think that, again, like it's showing accountability and maturity and gives them a more genuine feel to the interview itself. At the end, after this interview, you want to make sure you send a thank you note, right? That's important. I know it's old, it's like old school, but sending a quick email to say, thanks so much for your time. I think it's better to do it than to wonder if you should have done it. And then if you talked about something specific, especially an alumni for a student, right? Like anything that they shared that was personal, that were like, oh, okay, that was a great connector for me, or, was a great aha moment, then, thank them for that. And then something that happens so often is that people will go into the different forums and, ask about their chances and things like that. Like, I need you to know you got to this point, right? Like you got the interview, you are admissible. And everybody is also human, right? So let's say that the interview doesn't go super well. Maybe that's something you put into the thank you note of like, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I know I was a little bit nervous, but I hope that you know that you were able to glean that Kellogg is my #1 program or MBA program, and I really want to be there. I think that it's okay, again, to own that if you need to. And then obviously, if there's any moment that, HBS has a post-interview reflection. So if there's anything else that you need to do, make sure that you've got those items checked off your list. And then I guess here's our checklist, right? So you want to review your top 5 stories. Be ready to talk about them. Just in case they're asked, you want to be able to say like, okay, I know I have these stories and I can adapt them a little bit based on what the question actually is asking. You want to check your surroundings, your computer, make sure everything is working. Even if it's, like saying like, hey, like, can I do a quick Zoom call with a friend and before the interview itself so that I can make sure everything is working. And then you want to think about some questions that you want to ask your interviewer ahead of time. And then I guess like this is reinforcing this whole thing of, nerves are a sign of importance. And so you want to make sure that you're prepared and that you keep yourself grounded throughout the entire process. So if you are sitting here and you have an interview coming up and you're not ready and you want some help, let me know. My email address is here. You can use the QR code to make an appointment with me. But I'm really excited for you in this next step and look forward to speaking with you soon.